7. The Secret to Self Control. In 1971, as the Vietnam War was heading into its 16th year, Congressmen Robert Steele from Connecticut and Morgan Murphy from Illinois made a discovery that stunned the American public. While visiting the troops, they had learned that over 15% of US soldiers stationed there were heroin addicts. Follow up research revealed that 35% of service members in Vietnam had tried heroin, as many as 20% were addicted. The problem was even worse than they had initially thought. The discovery led to the flurry of activity in Washington, including the creation of Special Action Office of Drug Abuse Prevention under the President Nixon to promote prevention and rehabilitation to track addicted service members when they returned home. Lee Robbins was one of the researchers in charge in finding that completely upended the accepted beliefs about addiction. Robin found that soldiers who had been heroin users returned home, only 5% of them become re-addicted within a year, and just 12% relapsed within 3 years. In other words, approximately 9 out of 10 soldiers who used heroin in Vietnam eliminated their addiction nearly overnight. This finding contradicted the prevailing view at time, which considered heroin addiction to be permanent and irreversible condition. Instead, her Robin revealed that addictions could spontaneously dissolve if there was a radical change in the environment. In Vietnam, soldiers spent all day surrounded by cues triggering heroin use. It was easy to access, therefore engulfed by the constant stress of war. They built friendships with fellow soldiers who were also heroin users, and they were thousands of miles from home. Once a soldier returned to the United States, though, he found himself in an environment devoid of these triggers. When the context changed, so did the habit. Compare the situation of a typical drug user. Someone becomes addicted at home or with friends, goes to a clinic to get clean, which is devoid of all environmental stimuli that prompt their habit, then returns to their old neighborhood with all of their previous cues that caused them to get addicted in the first place. It is no wonder that usually you see numbers that are exact opposite those in Vietnam study. Typically, 90% of heroin users become re addicted once they return home from rehab. The Vietnam studies ran counter to many of our cultural beliefs about bad habits because it challenged the conventional association of unhealthy behavior as a moral weakness. If you overweight a smoker or an addict, you would have been told your entire life that it is because you lack self control, maybe even that you are a bad person. The idea that a little bit of discipline would solve all the problem is deeply embedded in our culture. Recent research, however, shows that something different. When scientists analyze people who appear to be tremendous self control, it turns out those individuals are not at all different from those who are struggling. Instead, disciplined people are better at structuring their lives in a way that does not require heroic willpower and self-control. In other words, they spend less time in tempting situations. The people with the best self-control are typically the ones who need to use it with the least. It's easier to practice self restraint when you don't have to use it very often. So, yes, perseverance, grit, and willpower are essential to success. But the way to improve these qualities is not by wishing you were a more disciplined person, but by creating more disciplined environment. This is counter initiative makes you even worse sense once you understand what happens when a habit is formed in the brain. A habit that has been encoded in the mind is ready to be used whenever the relevant situation arises. When Patty Olwell, a therapist from Austin, Texas, started smoking, she would often light up the while riding horses with a friend. Eventually, she quit smoking and avoided it for years. She had also stopped riding. Decade later, she hopped in on a horse again and found herself craving for a cigarette for the first time in forever. The cues were still internalized. She just had not been exposed to them in a long time. Once a habit has been encoded, the urge to act follows whenever the environmental cues reappear. This is one reason behavior change techniques can backfire. Shaming obese people with the weight loss presentation can make them feel stressed, and as a result, many people return to their favorite coping strategy, overeating. Showing pictures of blackened lungs to smokers lead to their higher levels of anxiety, which drives many people to reach for a cigarette. If you are not careful about cues, you can cause the very behavior you want to stop. Bad habits are autocatalytic. The process it feeds itself. They foster the feelings that try to numb. You feel bad, so you eat junk food. Because you eat junk food, you feel bad. Watching television makes you feel sluggish, so you watch television more because you don't have the energy to do anything else. Worrying about your health makes you feel anxious, which causes you to smoke to ease your anxiety, which makes your health even worse, and soon you're feeling more anxious. It's a downward spiral, a runway train of bad habits. Researchers refers to this phenomena as cue-induced wanting. An external trigger causes compulsive craving to repeat a bad habit. Once you notice something, you begin to want it. This process is happening all time, often without us realizing it. Scientists have found that showing addicts a picture of cocaine for just 33 milliseconds stimulates the reward pathway in the brain and sparks desire. This speed is too fast for the brain to consciously register. The addicts could not even tell you what they had seen, but they craved the drug all the same. Here's the punchline: you can break a habit, but you are unlikely to forget it. Once the mental grooves of habit have been craved into your brain, they are nearly impossible to remove entirely, even if they go unused for quite a while. And that means that simply resisting temptations is an ineffective strategy. It is hard to maintain a Zen attitude in a life filled with interruptions. It takes too much energy. In a short run, you can choose to overpower temptation. In the long run, we become a product of in the environment that we live in. To put it bluntly, I have never seen someone consistently stick to positive habits in a negative environment. A more reliable approach is to cut bad habits off at the source. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. If you can't seem to get any work done, leave your phone in other room for few hours. If you are continually feeling like you are not enough, stop following social media accounts that trigger your jealousy and envy. If you are wasting too much time wasting watching television, move TV out of the bedroom. If you are spending too much money on electronics, quit reading reviews of the latest tech gear. If you are playing too many video games, unplug the console and put it in a closet after each use. This practice is the inversion of the first law of behavior change. Rather than make it obvious, you can make it invisible. I am often surprised by how effective simple changes like these can be. Remove a single cue and the entire habit often fades away. Self control is the short term strategy, not a long term one. You may be able to resist temptations once or twice, but it's unlikely you can muster the willpower to override your desires every time. Instead of summoning a new dose of willpower whenever you want to do the right thing, your energy would be better spent optimizing your environment. This is the secret to self control. Make the cues of your good habits obvious and cues of your bad habits invisible. Chapter summary: the inversion of the first law of behavior change is make it invisible. Once a habit is formed, it is unlikely to be forgotten. People with high self control tend to spend less time in tempting situations. It's easier to avoid temptation than resist it. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. Self control is the short term strategy, not a long term one.